This is the Bloody Shed Lounge Annex.
Yeah. Storage room.
Storage room? It's not even a storage room.
The wine cellar.
Oh, it's the green room.
The green room.
We're in the wine cellar?
Yeah.
Okay, we're in the wine cellar.
We just need wine.
Oh. Well, you know what? The way this week is going, I feel like we need whiskey.
Well, and it goes along with our theme.
It does. Our theme tonight is... Oh, we haven't even said welcome. Welcome to Bloody Shed Lounge.
We're recording.
Oh, we are.
Well, hello, everyone.
Welcome to Bloody Shed Lounge.
Welcome to Bloody Shed Lounge.
This... Yeah, what were we saying? This is a whiskey week.
This is a whiskey week, a whiskey day, a whiskey year, maybe?
Oh, yeah, maybe it's a whiskey year.
Maybe it's a whiskey year.
This is a tequila year.
But we're going to have a rootin' tootin'.
Oh, you're already coming out with the Old West.
I can't resist. There's no way I can resist. So, thank you for listening to us. We appreciate you. Check us out on Spotify and Facebook and anywhere that you can listen to podcasts at this point.
iTunes, the whole shebang.
Like us, share us, visit our Patreon page, and if you're so inclined and feeling generous, any donation is appreciated because we can't do this without you.
That is the truth. Well, we could, but it's not as fun without a little bit of help.
It's not as fun, and we could do even more with your help. And we do this because we love it and because we love your feedback.
So, I kind of got swallowed up by one guy first. That's not a saying I should say.
Start over. Pause.
All right, let's try that again.
Yeah, you'll regret that one.
Anyway, I ended up with one guy. I've got 3 stories, but they're all about one guy, Jim Miller.
Jim Miller.
Yeah. So, you know how we have this thing about burying the lead? I always bury the lead. I like to build suspense.
Yeah.
Yeah, there ain't no building any suspense with this dude.
Okay.
He was a killer for hire, and he was more than happy to tell you, I kill for money.
He wore it on his sleeve.
He wore it on his sleeve. There's there's a legend of a retired Texas Ranger, Jim Gillett, was in Alpine, Texas. A lot of this takes place in Texas. And he's in a barber shop. This is the late 1880s. And Miller pops his head into the barber shop and... I hear tell somebody in Alpine wants Judge Gillis killed. Pass the word. I'll do the job for $200. What?
Wow.
You just said that to a Texas Ranger.
Not shy.
No, not at all. Not at all. So he was born in 1861 in Arkansas, and he died in 1909 in Oklahoma. And I've got 3 stories that I'll split this all up because there's so much. I just figured I'd do the start of it all, the highlight of it all, and the end of it all.
Okay.
Because this dude killed over and over and over. He got arrested over and over and over, and the motherfucker got acquitted over and over and over.
Wow.
He basically started a Murder Incorporated thing in Texas and Oklahoma and New Mexico before Murder Incorporated existed. He set the bar of showing up, killing somebody, having conveniently an alibi, or racing across the countryside 100 miles in the night, killing his horse to get to a spot so he could send a telegram to prove that he was over there when that happened over there.
Wow. This guy was lunatic.
Yet he was very proud to say, I mean, he said it to a judge on a train once that he's quote unquote lost his notchstick on how many, he said Mexicans at the time, so it's not like they weren't racist at the time, to a judge. And the judge wouldn't say anything about it until he was dead, because the judge figured if I do, I'm probably dead. So,
jeez.
Yeah. And it's amazing. He became like a sheriff at one point. So this story makes you wonder, how did he become a sheriff? Because this is pretty fucked up. So by 1884... he was from a family of 9 kids, and his dad had died really young. Nobody knows what the cause was, but it was, at this point, 1884, he and his sister Georgia were the youngest. And he was 23, Georgia was 21, and they were in Coryell County, Texas, and living at the house of John Coop with Mom. And John Coop was a little bit older. He was 34. And Jim, by this point, he's starting to build a little bit of a reputation for himself. Even though he was young, he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he didn't chew, didn't even cuss much, and he was always going to church. Like on the outward, he appeared to be just a soft-spoken gentleman. Did his best, especially as he was more successful later on. He would always wear very fine clothes and
don't trust the quiet ones.
No. Well, not that he was quiet, but you would think this seems like and that's how he got
upstanding.
Away. That's how he got away with a lot of this stuff, is because even after he was killed, people would say, like, known he was legendary for being a man who murdered for hire, and yet people still like, but he was such a nice guy.
Oh.
So, that dark side, that led to John Coop's death, that's for damn sure. And a lot of people believe that this was Jim's first killing. So here's where it gets a little weird, because in the Old West, man, do they love their legends.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take long. While I was researching this, within months of some of these things, legends were forming and people were believing things that were not, in fact, true. And of course, we have the luxury now of looking through old newspaper. Everything's digitized, right? So we can't criticize books from the 40s or whatever, because they just found what they found. A lot believe that he killed his grandparents as a child. It's everywhere. You'll see it in YouTube videos, etc. He did not. His grandparents were still alive when all this went down, and they weren't even living in the state. So anyone who knows the story, just like cross that one off. He did not kill his grandparents. End of story. But he did probably kill Coop. So some stories will say that Jim and Coop had a falling out, or that Jim was an unruly kid, which on its face right there, that doesn't even make sense. What we just said, everyone says he was this polite guy, right?
Yeah.
Yet you're saying that he was unruly. So, But they say that he didn't get along with Coop because Coop was older and trying to reprimand him, kind of the classic, you're not my dad kind of thing, right?
Right.
But there's no evidence of it. Not that it isn't true, but there's no evidence of it. So who knows what happened and what the reason is? I have some theories that I can get to at the end. But end of June 1884, 4 months after Georgia and Coop are married, Jim's approaching a neighbor, Basham, that he had sold a shotgun to, a double-barrel shotgun. And he's asking, can I borrow that gun? Oh, and can you hide it out on the property so I can get to it? No. What the hell for? Well, to kill Coop. And Basham's response was, let that matter alone. That matter. Okay, we don't know what that matter is, but let that alone. Miller then says, like, he tries to shove blame off on James Gould. James Gould would do it. He tried before, but he lost the nerve. And okay, well, just drop this matter. So a month goes by, July 25th, and he shows up again at Basham's house while Basham and his wife are sleeping on the front porch. It's middle of summer. It was pretty common that back then, before air conditioning, everyone slept on the front porch. And he shows up again and says, tell your wife to sleep inside tonight and stay here, so I've got an alibi. What? And bring your gun out. Set it where I can get to it. So again, no, right? No, I am not going to assist you in alibi you in killing somebody. And of course, then Basham goes and tells Coop, your life's in danger. 5 days later, July 30th, 1884, Jim's going to a camp meeting, which is like an outdoor religious service.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I had to look that. I'm like, what the hell is a camp meeting?
I didn't know, but that makes sense.
Oh, okay, yeah. So he's walking with Lee Basham, and he says, I'm going to kill a fellow tonight. So Lee, of course, advises him not to.
Yeah.
Obviously. And Jim then spends the first part of the evening sitting near a lady, chatting this lady up, and just sitting there. And then the services begin. The sun is setting. and the preaching begins. And by now he's wandered off, talked to a couple of people, and poof, disappeared. Somebody even took his seat, so they know he was not there. Someone else was sitting there. 40 minutes go by. Services are now just about to end, and he's back. He's suddenly there again, sitting next to the lady. It's about 9:15 p.m., and they know because he walks up to somebody and asks them, who's a little extra bouncy and excitable, and is hey, compare watches. What time do you have? So they know, like, we compared watches. It was 9:15.
Kind of trying to alibi himself, maybe?
Yeah, you think? So the camp church thing winds down, and it's about 10 o'clock, and they're definitely winding down because they have now gotten word John Coop is dead. Several people decide, you know, let's go over to Coop's house. Let's, you know, walk the ladies home. And Jim and Lee Basham are heading down the road. I forget how far. It's like it's maybe 3 or 4 miles, depending on how you go. And Jim mutters to him, "I got off with that fellow. You thought I did not have the nerve to do it, but goddamn him, I got him all the same."
Wow.
Okay, so now we know damn sure it has to be you, dude, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they're walking down the road, and a few other guys, Coop's brother and a couple of others start showing up on the road. So this group is going, and suddenly Jim declares to the group out loud, "I think James Gould killed Coop. Keep still. If he did it, we'll get him." and I tried. I could not figure out who the hell this James Gould guy is. He shows up here and there in articles and stuff, but not related to this. No idea who the dude was. So meanwhile, let's go back to what happened in that 40 minutes that Jim Miller's like just not at the camp meeting he claims he was at. Well, Georgia, his sister, is asleep on the bed just inside the door of the house, Coop's house. 9 months pregnant. Coop's nephew, Jake Fulton, is in a room. Mom, Cynthia is her name, is in a room, and Coop's out sleeping on the porch. Again, before air conditioning, so a lot of people slept out on the porch. And Jim's older brother, Bill Miller, he was actually there too. He was visiting with his wife and kids, and he was sleeping in a small guest house on the property. And everyone had gone to sleep by 8 o'clock. Bang. Everyone's woken up by a shotgun blast, and then an even louder shotgun blast. Everyone's like, what the fuck? Bill's like jumping out of his skin to get over there to the house and see what's going on. He can't. His wife is clinging to him. "Stay here." I'm understandable. It's the whole family's there. Their kids are there. Nobody knows what the hell is going on. But then he hears John Coop call out his name, call for him. So he tears himself away from his wife and runs over there. And John Coop is face down trying to get up, and Bill turns him over onto his back, and he dies right there on the spot. And Bill thinks he can hear maybe there's a horse racing off in the distance, but nobody knows. Georgia, who is inside the house, just inside the door, obviously is woken up. She had looked out the door. She didn't see anyone. She wasn't going to go look. She's 9 months pregnant. I'm like, I'm going to stay right here. I don't know what's going on. So Bill gets a horse off of the property and gathers up Jake Fulton, Coop's nephew, and sends him to notify the neighbors and send for officials. There's been a murder. John Coop is dead. And best anyone can tell, he had a glancing shot on his chest, and then the killing shot was in the back. Shot in the back. Not even face-to-face, shot in the back.
Wow.
Yeah. And he had been sleeping on a pallet bed at the end of the gallery, I guess long porch. I don't know what a gallery is. Is that like a long porch?
Yeah, it sounds like some kind of a porch.
So, of course, all the neighbors show up. Of course, Jim Miller is there, and somebody says, "You know what might have happened here?" And Jim's response was, "He was here," and points at his brother. Like,
wow, what a jerk.
Yeah. Like
trying to throw his brother under the bus.
And whoever Jim Gould was. Yeah, it's like anyone except me. Mm-hmm. So a sheriff comes the next morning, and there's an inquest, and they search for a weapon, and they find a recently fired shotgun in Bill Miller's wagon. So everyone's thinking, it was Bill Miller. He is just coming in from out of town. But it didn't take long for anyone to start realizing this Jim guy. What's up with Jim? But the camp alibi, that was his alibi. Everyone said he was there, but he had 40 minutes that he couldn't account for. And everyone knew that Coop himself had done a little test maybe just weeks before. I wonder how long it would take to get from there to here. So Jim knew from that test.
Why did he do that, I wonder?
That I don't know. I maybe just for fun or whatever. But over a rough beeline path, 35 minutes.
Okay.
So with 40 minutes missing out of his alibi, and knowing that it takes 35 minutes,
it doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good. And you would think that, this is sealed and done, right?
Maybe.
Right? So the trial begins. It's late December. Georgia has had her kid. Jim files 2 motions for continuance so he can get his witnesses. He claims he's got 2 witnesses, Wilkins and Thacker.
Do you know, how old is he now?
He's 22, 23 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. And Wilkins and Thacker seem to be hard to get a hold of, but it doesn't matter because, he needs them to prove his missing 40 minutes that he was actually there. He also requests a change of venue, which is common, right? Mm-hmm. They denied all of it. They just flat out denied it. He made 2 attempts at it, and nope. And he's convicted to a life sentence. All right, done, right?
Okay.
Well, attorneys take up the case to the Texas Court of Appeals.
Mm-hmm. Which is common.
Yeah.
I don't know how common it was back then, but that's what happens here.
Right. And the conviction is reversed because of several minor issues like tainting a witness in the jury's eyes. Like they tried to make Bill Miller look unreliable, but based on completely unrelated facts.
It sounds like he had some pretty decent lawyers, actually.
And that's one of the things about Jim Miller. He always got the best lawyers and always got out of it. But what the clincher was the due diligence in getting his defense alibi on record. That if that's his alibi, you have to allow him to get his 2 witnesses together because that's essential to proving his point, and you didn't allow that.
Okay.
The thing is nobody knows if he even had these alibis, right? But that's how he got out of this. So he killed his brother-in-law for God knows what reason, and he's in the wind.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so that is the first murder of Jim Miller.
That was good legal defense.
Yeah. So nobody even talked about motive. Like just claiming Georgia said they got along. But you know what I think? Like in all the history books, no one ever, they talk about how this all went down, but they never talk about motive other than they didn't get along. But can we go back to, there was one thing that he had said, Coop had said that before all of this, that he was a little concerned for his life because of a spat over the ownership of livestock, a sheep, I think it was.
Well, it could be. There could be some motive. It could have been a very small motive that he just harbored a resentment.
Possibly. My thought in this, and there's nothing that proves this, and no one could have asked Georgia about it. She ended up dying herself. So I don't.
She did?
Yeah, she died the next year. Mom died the next year. So everyone's like dead in 1885. But when you do the math, she was 9 months pregnant, but she had just gotten married 4 or 5 months ago. So she was pregnant out of wedlock in 1885.
Maybe he felt that he had disrespected her?
Possibly. I have no idea. Maybe this guy, because he was, it sounds like you're describing kind of a sociopath, maybe he had some kind of a resentment that he didn't share with anyone. It's possible. It seems like maybe somebody knew something because when he was going to the neighbor asking for his assistance and he said, let that matter alone. That sounds specific. Nobody's ever known what that matter is. But there was a matter. It wasn't just that they didn't like each other.
Right.
Because Georgia said they got along famously.
Yeah. If they're referring to some matter, there was something. They just didn't go into detail. Maybe because of the times, they felt that it wasn't polite to discuss whatever it was?
Probably, yeah. Anyway, the story of Jim Miller, Chapter 2, or Act 2.
Act 2. Act 2.
What did you just say? Oh, my God.
I'm losing my mind over here.
So after a couple of years after John Coop's death, the story gets a little murky. And a lot of it is probably not really provable because, part of the problem in doing this research is his last name's Miller. The only thing that you could get would be Smith.
Right. Yeah, that's very common.
So, but we do know is at some point he kind of drifts into McCulloch County and gets a job working for Emmanuel Manning Clements Sr., working as a stockman, cowhand, whatever, cowboy. And Manning Clemens was, he was a violent man himself. And he was the older cousin of a guy named John Wesley Hardin. Do you know who that is?
It sounds familiar.
Probably, yeah, it's probably what a lot of people will say is, I don't know, it sounds like something, but he's a famous gunslinger.
I do know this name.
So he knew Wild Bill Hickok, but what he's most famous for is kind of one weird oddity in history. This is the guy who is famous for having once killed a man for snoring.
Oh, no, that's not who I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's John Wesley Hardin.
Okay.
It was just trying to shut the guy up by shooting through the wall, but you aimed where his head happened to be on the other side of the wall.
People were gun happy back then.
Telling you. So anyway, that was a cousin of Manning Clements, and Miller became good friends with Clements' son, also Emmanuel Clements. He went by Manny Clements Jr., and also was a little sweet on his daughter, Sarah Frances Clements, love interest.
Oh, okay.
And he's working there, and it's not very long before Manning's own life just caught up with him, and he was shot and killed in the Senate Saloon by in Ballinger by the city marshal Joe Townsend. And interesting aside, this is probably another unproven next kill, is that November 11th, 1887, Townsend's in his family grocery store. Again, the history books do this weird thing because, it's the Old West. We got to make them look, proud and tall, right? Mm-hmm. So in all the history books, he's in his saddle going down the road. No, he was just in the family grocery store.
That's not very glamorous.
No, not at all. Someone calls his name and he steps out to greet them, and instead he's greeted with 2 shotgun blasts that pretty much almost rip his arm off. And he actually survives, but that's the end of his sheriffing career, and his arm had to be amputated. And nobody knows, no one was arrested, but it's believed that this is probably Jim Miller's work, ingratiating himself with the family. He married Sarah. Actually, they called her Sally, but he married Sarah 3 months later.
What was the motive behind that?
Vengeance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, everything back then was eye for an eye.
Okay.
You shot my dad, I'm shooting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's that, but that's how he makes friends with Manny Clements and kind of carries him through and meets his wife. Mm-hmm. So nobody's entirely sure about how he then ends up in Pecos, Texas. One logical possibility is that Manny was wanted for some other murder, and so he was skipping town. So they just kind of all packed up and made their way to Pecos. In Pecos, he starts to do the same thing. He attends church and is ingratiating himself as an upstanding pillar of the community. So much so that September 1st, 1891, Miller, on his good graces, is hired as a deputy by the Reeves County Sheriff, George A. Bud Frazier.
Okay, so now they're giving him even more authority.
Right. And Bud was, he was a little spitfire, and I don't mean that in any disrespect. He was little. There's a photo where you see all these monstrous people, and like the crowd gets smaller and smaller, and there he is, like say he might be 5'2" or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the sheriff, and he could use a little help because Pecos at the time was, a little rough and tumble.
Okay.
So he was born in 1864. And he was the son of George Milton Frazier. And George, his father, he had a good legacy. He fought the Spanish-American War. He formed one of the first Arizona Ranger companies back in 1861 and, fought the Apaches, all that nonsense. Bud himself was no fucking saint. And he had a temper. So that temper led to bad things when he was 21 years old, just 6 years before all of this. By bad things, it led to 3 deaths, one of them being his brother. These
people just had temper, a lot of anger management issues.
Yeah, there was hardly any real law back then, and decorum, I guess you could say. So Fort Stockton, Texas, he and a brother, James, they totally intrude on Pedro Sosa's house for a St. Peter's Day Mexican dance. They're just celebrating a little holiday. And these white dudes, they had not been invited to this party. They just showed up and kind of blustered their way in. And at some point...
Just to start bullying people?
Oh, yeah. It's like 11 o'clock at night. Bud gets pushy and tried to take over Mexican quadrille, which is a dance. Because he knew how it should go. Like, you weren't even invited to this. Because, he gets in a spat with Pedro's son, Pablo, who protested. And so he punches Pablo. Remember, he's a non-guest.
Uninvited guest that
in
sort
their
of
house,
pushes his way in.
And you just punched the house homeowner's son.
He just showed up to cause trouble is what it sounds like to me.
And then so Pablo goes outside to his friends and brother outside, and they come back in and he reconfronts Bud. Now Bud pistol whips him, cracks him over the head with his pistol butt. And so now Pablo's dad and friends, they all rush forward. Bud's brother, James, he's 18, so he's a little younger, he gets in the middle of everyone to try and break things up. But before, like a blink of an eye, Pedro and others have grabbed James and pulled him away and are stabbing him now. Meanwhile, Pedro is tussling with Bud, who manages to get his gun. He only had 3 bullets in the gun. He pulls his gun and just like wildly shooting at the people who are stabbing his brother. And meanwhile, his brother stumbles out and runs down the street and collapses a few houses down, dead.
From gunshot or being stabbed?
No, from being stabbed. And they weren't even sure that night that Bud's bullets had hit anyone, but the next day they found two of the people at the party dead, and everyone's arrested.
The party would have been fine if Bud hadn't shown up.
Yeah. But, all the articles of the day, most of the articles, not all of them, most of the articles of the day are just dismissive of it as some Mexicans. And yeah, it just breaks my heart. But anyway, that's a different thing. So but the articles that did clarify said that all disinterested reports tend to exculpate the Mexicans from responsibility for the fray. So,
well, at least there was some honesty.
Yeah. So that's Bud Frazier, who is now a sheriff.
Right.
And runs smack dab into Jim Miller, who is a sociopath, I'm sure.
Great combination.
Well, call it oil and water. So 27-year-old Frazier, he'd only been a sheriff for a few months and probably got it because his dad was a judge. He needed a deputy really bad. Probably should have vetted Miller a little more. I mean, it can't be that hard to figure out.
But he probably charmed them and kind of schmoozed his way into the position.
And I think back then it was probably a little rude to ask too many questions.
Well, and how would you prove anything? It's not like today where you can easily, just do a search on someone and find out all kinds of history back then.
Yeah. Turns out you may or may not have killed your brother-in-law
right.
4 years ago.
I mean, they could probably have made some phone calls, or I don't know if that. Who knows? But
yeah,
telegrams. I don't know what they did.
Yeah,
back
they had
then.
telegrams. So. Not long after Miller starts on, I mean, it was awesome to have somebody helping just in time because, man, cattle rustling and horse theft was just getting out of hand all of a sudden. And, they got along fine at first. Maybe it was a little frustrating because, Miller kept chasing the thieves, but dagnabbit, he just never seemed to catch them.
I told you.
What?
You'd come out with some zingers.
That's not a zinger. Dagnabbit. And so enter Barney Riggs, who is well known as a gunslinger in his own right, but his story is a story for another day. But he is now Bud Frazier's brand spanking new brother-in-law, married his sister. Barney Riggs wasn't buying this whole story at all. Really? You couldn't catch any of these criminals? And hey, by the way, the crime wave started about the time Miller became deputy. Don't you think maybe you should look into that? I mean, Riggs, he knew his way around a few crimes. He'd been in prison. He was proud of saying, I'm a man who was put in prison for killing a man and got out of prison by killing two because he broke up a riot.
So he smelled a rat.
Yeah, he smelled a rat. So, okay, fine. I'll talk to him about it. Frazier confronts Miller, who just totally laughs it off. Like, what? Yeah, whatever. I mean, with what ammunition do you have? Miller is like becoming popular. He's an upstanding citizen. He's involved in the church. This dude never even cussed, and we're not even sure how much he gambled, if at all. So Frazier let it be until the day that Jim killed a prisoner. It was a prisoner he was taken to Fort Stockton, claiming the man tried to escape. I had to shoot him. He was trying to get away. That's when Frazier started looking into things. This just something smells funny. It didn't help that Frazier was missing a couple of mules. And Barney said, Miller probably took them, right? I mean, hell, Miller probably killed the guy for knowing where Miller had hidden the mules, right? Frazier starts snooping around and tracking down, maybe he can find his mules. And he does. He finds his mules. I don't know how. I guess maybe just they're branded or something, right?
Yeah, definitely. So they would definitely mark their own cattle and mules. And
so he does. He finds his mules. They've been sold to some guy by Miller.
Wow.
So then there's this weird...
That's brazen.
Uh-huh. So then there's this weird little dance they do that... again, the books get wrong. He confronts him and fires him. No, he tells Miller, hey, I found my mules. But he doesn't tell him that he knows that, like, you sold the fucking mules.
So he was setting him up.
Yeah. So he asks Miller, can you help me get them back from this guy? I want him to pay me for the mules so that I don't want him to get in trouble, right? He just bought the mules. He wouldn't have known they're stolen. So if he gives me the money, then we'll just call it fine. And I don't need to arrest him.
Oh, yeah, right.
and Miller says, oh, yeah. I can probably help you with that. But this guy, he doesn't have any money. So I'll have to, find a way to take care of this. So he does. And like they quiet it down and that's the end of it. But Frazier says, I'm just going to let this guy go. So, sorry, dude, you're fired. So he fires Miller, and I think Miller was probably pretty sure of the reason.
Yeah, and I'm sure he was sure of the reason, but then also because of his pride, probably was incredibly offended.
Who knows? All I can tell you is this is when things get nasty.
Okay.
So 1892, now Miller's got no job. And there's a Pecos sheriff election about to happen. So Jim Miller opposes Bud Frazier. Didn't do any good. Miller lost. So then, but I don't know how this happened, but maybe because the town liked him, he gets himself appointed Pecos City Marshal.
This guy's a true politician.
Right? And so now he starts hiring people to work with him. Manny Clements. His murderous buddy, right? His like night deputy.
Getting the gang back together.
Yeah, brings in a bunch of henchmen, like some of them are cousins of John Wesley Hardin. So, of course, somewhere along the way, Miller finds out that Frazier has now discovered the other things that he's doing. Yeah, all the missing horses and cattle and stuff, that's been Miller the whole time. Of course he wasn't catching the thieves.
No.
So a lot more than a couple of mules is an issue. So Frazier's going to cause trouble probably. So I think it's time to get rid of him. He starts whispering around and trying to talk to people, again, because he's totally brazen, and asking people, hey, here's our idea. They come up with numerous versions. We're going to get him while he's crossing over a bridge, or fake a shootout on the railroad station platform and he can get caught in the crossfire, so to speak. And there's a Mexican dance. Well, you just need to say you saw a Mexican run off and
set him up.
Yeah.
And
And that last one was like Con Gibson, J.C. Con Gibson. That's a horrible nickname, Con.
That's his nickname?
That's his nickname. Yeah, Bud is a nickname. Con is a nickname.
Well, that kind of gives it all away right there.
So Con says, no, I ain't helping you. And he also goes and tells Bud, they're conspiring to kill you, right? So Bud starts to get sneaky and starts taking a bunch of trips. It's better to be out of town and plot so they don't kill me while I'm planning, right? So he's making several trips with his wife to El Paso and other places, and he's contacted Texas Rangers. So July 10th, 1893, Frazier drives into town with 6 men, a couple of Texas Rangers. And they quietly go around looking and gathering up all the co-conspirators and holding them in prison. And Miller is indicted for intent to murder.
Okay.
Right? Conspiring to kill Frazier. And the case was transferred to El Paso, and it all falls flat.
Because he hired some good lawyers again?
Who knows? Yeah, probably. Everything anyone tried, they could not get this guy. Slippery motherfucker. And the El Paso throws out the case because of jurisdiction issues. Con Gibson is scared shitless now because now they're out. They're going to have another trial, but still.
Now, does Jim know that Con is the one that sort of ratted him out?
Yeah, so here's the thing. That when Bud was approached by him, he made Con put his signature on a document.
Yeah, you're not anonymous.
You're no longer anonymous. So Con gets scared and runs off to a town of Eddy, which is now called Carlsbad, New Mexico. And he's I'm moving there. So June 5th, 1894, he's shot in the head by one of Miller's henchmen, confronted him in a saloon, and actually, this is the gross part. He actually, he tried to fight back, but his gun gets caught in a suspender, so he can't do anything.
There's another reason not to wear suspenders.
Yes, see, don't wear suspenders in the Old West. And one article put it that Con Gibson was still alive. He'd lost a teacup full of brains, but he was still alive.
What?
A teacup full of brains.
Gross.
Wow.
That's so crude.
Yeah. But he's gone 3 or 4 days later. And meanwhile, there's another indictment against Miller and nothing comes of it. Witnesses didn't want to come forward, right? Frazier's getting nervous. Miller has lost his job as marshal because of all of this, right? So he buys a hotel and he's trying to lay low, pretend he's, an honest citizen. But he's also going around talking shit about little Frazier. Mm-hmm. And,
he can't keep his mouth shut.
He can't keep his mouth shut, and it's driving Frazier nuts. I think Bud Frazier, his temper comes back. He's walking around town and he spots Miller in front of, the stories vary, whether he's in front of his hotel or a furniture store or whatever. He's on the street talking to T.B. Pruitt and just having conversation. His back is to him. Frazier walks past him twice. On the third pass, he finally gets up the nerve to do crazy. He steps up, he pulls his gun and says, "You die right here." according to a witness anyway. And he just begins shooting him. He shoots him in the arm. He shoots him in the hand. Meanwhile, Miller is trying to reach around to get his gun with his left hand. And Frazier shoots him again. And this one hits just below the nipple, like right pretty much to the lung. And I think this is important for anyone out there who's reading on this, because here's where another one of the legends begins. All of the articles of the time say nothing about this. This legend doesn't exist until like the 30s, that all the bullets didn't work because he was wearing an iron, like he had always wore a dark coat, Miller did, and had like iron sewn into it, right, so that the bullets would bounce off. There is no proof of that. In fact, it is stated in an article he was shot in the lung, right? So this dude should be dead. He's not. Tells people, has Frazier arrested because Frazier ran off. He's gone by the time Miller had his gun out. That's another one. It's like there's no innocent bystander who's grazed by a bullet. He never even shot his gun. Frazier was gone by the time this all, like, he's on the ground with his right arm is shot. And
he's bleeding to death, basically.
Bleeding to death. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty dangerous stuff. If it goes right in there, that's hitting your lung, and you could have a collapsed lung unless you're one lucky motherfucker like he is.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So, yeah, Frazier's arrested by another sheriff. November 1894, he loses his re-election because he has now totally lost the town's confidence, right?
Well, isn't he in prison?
I think they always, every time it turns around, they get out on bail, basically, or they get bonded out. So now he's got no badge to protect him, and Miller has filed charges against him. And if that goes to court, that would nullify his own charge against Miller for conspiring to murder him. So this is like this weird...
It is. It's almost like it's almost like a mental warfare. Like they were playing like some sort of psychological games with each other as well. This is some bad blood.
Very bad blood. And Frazier cannot leave this shit alone. This now ex-sheriff encounters Jim Miller again a few months later. Like Miller had gone off and kind of recuperated, and he's back, and he's in front of Zimmer's blacksmith shop on December 26th, 1894. Here comes Frazier.
These guys need to move apart from each other.
I'm telling you, he grabs his gun and he tries again. He shoots Miller, this time from behind, hits Miller in the right arm again, and presumably in the chest. Here's where I don't know. Again, the legend that he got shot several times, but Miller was wearing an iron vest underneath there.
Maybe
Who
they're
knows?
saying the iron vest as like maybe as if he were wearing an iron vest, or do they really think he was wearing an iron vest?
No, of the day, no, there's no record of this at all. This is in like the 30s, 40s, 50s as people started writing about the West. That's when all of this pops up. The folklore that he was wearing an iron vest. There is no record of it at the time, and he was in fact shot in the lung on the first attempt.
Okay.
So anyway, Frazier runs off again, and Miller is still alive. And he is now at the Lockhausen Ranch, resting for a few more months, swearing, I'm going to kill Frazier. Even if I have to crawl 20 miles to do it, I am going to kill that motherfucker.
Right. Well, you kind of can't blame him at this point.
At this point, I mean, he is a murderer for hire, but...
Yeah.
Dude.
How many times can one person shoot you before you actually do want revenge?
Right. Meanwhile, completely unrelated to this, remember John Wesley Hardin, hardened criminal? He's let out of prison, and while he was in there, he was studying the law, and he got out and he took the bar and passed. So now he's an attorney. So March 1895, his cousin by marriage, Jim Miller, says, yeah, can you help me out here? Can you come represent me?
Great.
Yeah. So now let's fast forward a little bit of time. It kind of quiets down. May 1896, the ex-sheriff trial is scheduled. Both of his things against him were overturned, so he's fine. But still, this dude's probably going to come after me. So yeah, you are now acquitted of this stuff, and you tried to kill me twice. This ain't good enough for me. So Miller wants Frazier dead. Oh, and you know what? I'm going after that Barney Riggs dude too, because he started all this shit.
Now he has a list.
Yeah, you started all this shit by exposing my thievery. You're going down too. So Bud is trying to skip town because now he's tried to kill the dude twice.
Yeah, he needs to go somewhere.
Yeah, so he's now, and he's not a sheriff anymore. You don't have the badge to protect you, dude. So he's buying a small livery business in Eddy, Carlsbad, New Mexico. Getting out of town.
Good idea.
Uh-huh. The morning of September 14th, 1896, Bud, who was trying to lay low, he knew damn well he was wanted by a killer, and he makes the mistake of visiting sisters who live in Toya, Texas, which is just right down the street, maybe, 20 miles away from Pecos. So he's in a saloon one morning playing cards with friends, and Miller is outside. Miller doesn't play around. His weapon of choice is a double-barrel shotgun. All he did was poke the barrel through the doors of the saloon.
The swinging doors.
Yeah, just poke the barrel through and shot twice and literally just about blew Frazier's head off.
He wasn't messing around.
No. And rides back to Pecos.
Was Frazier's dad still a judge at this time?
Oh, yes. Nobody seemed willing to stop this dude. And he wasn't done. Next up, Barney Riggs.
Okay.
So Barney Riggs, he had to die. He knew what I was up to. So late 1896, two of Miller's henchmen, John Denson and Bill Earhart. On the morning of October 3rd, 1896, Riggs was filling in as a bartender for a friend at a saloon. And Denson and Earhart come in. Denson invites everyone, have a drink with me. Okay, fine. So they sidle up. They're on either side of Barney. And Denson's casually looking and sees he ain't got his gun on him. So they down a drink. And the second drink, Riggs is on to them. He declines, kind of steps away from the two men, back over to the bar on the side. All right, okay, fine, I'll agree to another. And so they do another shot, and he doesn't actually drink, he pours it down his shirt, so it just kind of dribbles on the floor while they're taking their shots. And at this point, Earhart slowly lifting his gun, but guess what? Denson was wrong. Barney did have his gun, and he was faster. Some say Earhart's bullet might have grazed Barney. I don't know. There's not much record of that, but that was the last millisecond of Earhart's life. There was a struggle with Denson. Denson runs out, so Barney just goes over, and while he's running down the road, just like in the movies, and just takes aim and shoots him, pop, right in the back of the head.
That went wrong.
It did not go the way it was supposed to. So he went and turned himself in. So here's what happened.
Who did?
Riggs.
Okay.
Yeah, so here's what happened. Went to trial. The jury debated 4 minutes.
4 minutes?
4 minutes.
You can't even sit down and get situated.
Well, no, they sat through the trial, right? But then they go and they deliberate.
Yeah, but deliberating for 4 minutes? You can't even eat your free lunch that fast.
No, damn it. Yeah, I'm here for jury duty. I want my free meal.
I want my lunch.
So, and there was word there might have been more attempts. June 1897, Riggs was at a church ice cream social, and there were 2 dudes spotted sneaking around the back of the building with guns drawn. The women screamed, and the guys ran off. So it was time to, let's not poke the bear, right?
Right.
But he's acquitted. Miller's case is probably going to be mistrialed. The countryside was fearing there was going to this quarrel was going to keep going. But one of the local papers quotes Manny Clements saying that there will be no more fighting between Miller and Fraser families. Both Miller and Barney Riggs have agreed the feud should end. Since it has cost the lives of 5 men, Miller is not going to return to Pecos to live, so there is small chance for any of his old enemies to meet again.
Where's Miller living at this point?
I think I couldn't get that note in time for this podcast. I think he was living near El Paso or something because he was bonded out, but he had to stay nearby for the trial. So
he's still in Texas.
Yeah, he's still, almost all of this is in Texas. The end of the story is not in Texas.
Okay.
But that is pretty much, yes, everyone gets off. Miller is acquitted, and that is the end of one of the more famous feuds of Texas history. Pecos can go on for a normal life.
A sigh of relief across the plains.
Oh, yeah. For Pecos.
Okay.
Yeah. You ready for Act 3?
Act 3?
Act 3 of the story of Jim Miller's batshit craziness.
I'm ready.
So he continued to be a total pain in the ass. At this point, he is built up, his posse, his group of people, and he's got it down to a science. 1899, an attorney named Stanley tried to prosecute him on a charge of subordination and perjury. Soon after died of food poisoning. He worked as a Texas Ranger at a certain point, supposedly got involved in some shady murder case where Josiah Joe Earp, no relation, was going to testify that he had seen some guy, Joe Beasley, kill some other guy, Bill Junes, but changed his story at the last second, admitting that his charges against Beasley were false, and Miller had it was just a total frame job because Miller was going to try and get the 10 grand reward money that was offered. So the case is dismissed, and Jim is overheard on a train in conversation after the acquittal. You watch the papers. You will see where Joe will die of lead poisoning.
He's confident at this point.
This is with a judge there. And, yep, Joe Earp is shot down August 16th, 1900.
Well, he feels that he's untouchable.
Yeah, he totally believes he's untouchable. And legend is that this is when the Great Sheep Wars happened, and there was a bunch of, cattlemen having feuds over fences, and Miller would just offer up his services, $150 a murder.
That's blatant.
Yeah, it was insanity. But I think you're right. He thought he was untouchable, and he probably got a little bit lazy because he also hired the best fucking attorneys that you could. To this point, he's got money. He's showing up in the finest attire. Mm-hmm. I mean, this guy had a little empire of murderous thieves and thugs.
Right.
So with all that confidence, his legend was growing. I mean, there is a famous person that no one can prove to this day for sure. You know who Pat Garrett is?
No.
Pat Garrett is the man who killed Billy the Kid.
Oh, right.
Well, Pat Garrett, he dies. And this is in February of 1908. So, of course, Miller is accused of killing him, but they can't put him at the scene. And there's also a guy, Wayne Brazel, who comes forward and confesses to the crime immediately. Guess what his defense was?
Defense?
Self-defense.
Self-defense, yeah. Defense was defense.
Yeah. And Brazel was acquitted. So I feel like I don't know that I believe that Miller killed him, but he was around at the time. And
his hands were dirty.
He was in the area. But that we're not going to talk about because that, I swear to God, is an entire season of podcasts, and that is an area that we will get all the Wild West buffs up in arms over.
Okay, let's avoid that.
Yeah. So, final chapter of Killer Miller, which is also another modern thing. He didn't have nicknames in the day. Like they say Deacon Miller or Killer Miller. There's no article anywhere that confirms that was his nickname.
Yeah, the nicknames came later.
Yeah. So, Jim the Killer Miller. December 29th, 1908, Manny Clements, his brother-in-law, his as close as you can get to his best friend, his lifetime friend, is killed in El Paso's Coney Island saloon. And while talking to a smuggler, so it's not like he was doing anything on the up and up, and someone just walks in behind Manny and shoots him in the back of the head. That's the thing about a lot of these Western movies, right? They imagine this romanticized version of it. No, somebody walked up behind him and shot him point blank back of the head.
The shootouts very rarely happened.
Right.
Very rarely.
Right. So Miller swore revenge, swore he knew who it was. Nobody was really sure right away. There was a bartender who was suspected of taking some money for it, and he ended up on trial. And guess what? Acquitted. I don't know what his defense was.
Who in the world was actually serving prison sentences back then? Because everyone seemed to be acquitted.
Yeah, the morons who couldn't afford a good attorney.
Well, they might not even have been morons. They just couldn't afford defense.
Yeah, they weren't morons. That was presumptuous of them. So anyway, Miller is going to get revenge for Manny Clemens Jr. But first, I got a job. I got an assignment. So somebody had offered him $1,700 to kill a former U.S. Marshal, Alan Augustus or Gus Bobbitt, in Ada, Oklahoma. Okay, now we're heading out of state. So let's talk about Ada for a second. 1909, cotton was big business, and this is one dangerous town.
Cotton was huge business in this country, and
yeah, it was.
I can't even express to you like how much it changed business of our country. Yeah,
it was huge. People got violent. It was kind of like an agricultural gold rush.
Absolutely, it was.
And so Ada was kind of rough and wild and woolly, as they said back then. 36 people had been murdered in 1909. Bobbitt, he was a former U.S. Marshal there. He had retired from this job after Oklahoma had become a state, just like the previous year. And he'd moved to a ranch near Roth, Oklahoma, which is just down the way from Ada. And it could have been a nice, quiet retirement was pretty much a legendary sheriff in the area. But even in retirement, Bobbitt had a sense of honor, and he could not be quiet about things that were going on around him. Like local saloon owners, Jesse West and Joe Allen. These douchebags were practicing something called Indian skinning. So
yuck.
Not a literal thing, but so to explain this obnoxious term, let me give just a split second of history here. The Dawes Act of 1887 and several amendments to it basically equals the destruction of communities through land management to solve the quote-unquote Indian problem. So reservations were confiscated, chopped up, and tribal members could become U.S. citizens if they agreed to accept their 40 or 160 or 320 acre pieces of land. And it was Senator Henry Dawes who started this. He believed in the civilizing power of owning private land. Oh, and by the way, the rest of the land, when we had done divvying it up to the Native Americans who had agreed to this, that's surplus. We'll sell that to white people or use it, the resources on it, like where the oil derricks are and stuff.
Yeah, and the water.
And it fundamentally changed how Native American culture worked. It was no longer communal land. It was individual plots in a whole different system. They're isolated, no community. Their identity is broken. On land, they couldn't grow anything. There wasn't enough room for their livestock. And that was the exact goal. To destroy Native American culture, its entire political systems, the social glue of their lives, make them absorb into the American mainstream. That's how we'll solve the Indian problem, right? And in the process, 90 million acres stripped away from Native Americans, 2/3 of their land, now in white hands. And it continued until 1934. You can thank Franklin Delano Roosevelt for stopping that with the Indian Reorganization Act. But going back to our story, an example of how this was happening was with shady characters in Ada, Oklahoma. Indian skinning was this derogatory, completely disrespectful term for an even more disgusting practice of these opportunistic asshats coercing Native Americans to sell their land cheap. Older literature says through alcohol, let's get them drunk, which, okay, maybe, but that sounds a little bit like an outdated racist cliche to me, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Right? In fact, I found a contemporary article, 1909, that only says getting men out of the way, not drunk, getting them out of the way. So Oklahoma law required the sale to be approved by a county court judge. So that's why Gus Bobbitt was pissed, because he was vocal, pushing for change, put honest people in these elected positions, because this is what's going to happen. They're selling this land. He tried to stop these idiots. He'd run Jesse West, Joe Allen out of town in 1903, but they didn't do anything. They were back, and Bobbitt was popular, and they were trying to get their people elected. So you know what their solution was? Them fuckers hired Jim Miller. Solve our problem.
How did they know about him, I wonder?
Oh, Jim Miller is legendary at this point. He was who, any unsavory character knows.
So even outside of Texas, he was well known?
Yeah, definitely. He worked probably in New Mexico too. We don't know. He's just known in the area. Mm-hmm. So February 27th, 1909, Gus Bobbitt, or A.A. Bobbitt, was ambushed on the Ada Roff Road. He was going back home, driving his wagon home, couple loads of cottonseed meal for his animals, and some guy passes him. It was kind of odd because he was a really well-dressed guy, but he was on this like scruffy brown like farm mare horse. They didn't think anything of it. Why would you? But 600 yards from home, somebody pops out from behind an elm tree and a double-barrel shotgun, and he's shot, and he drops from the wagon. The second load of cottonseed meal was on Bob Ferguson's. He was a neighbor that Bobbitt had hired, help me out, bring this load back. So he was like a few, 100 yards back or something, and he sees this go down. He drops to the side of his wagon as he's riding down this bumpy road. He's literally holding on to the side of the wagon, and he pulls up next to the other wagon, Bobbitt's wagon. I think it might have even run away. The horses were spooked, and he looks up just in time to see a guy step out with his pistol. Like maybe he's going to finish the job, who knows, or maybe he's going for me, I don't know. So he whips his horses and he takes off and grabs up the runaway horses and heads down the driveway to the house where now Bobbitt's wife, Tennessee, she's already out there on the porch. Like I said, this is just a few hundred yards away, so she's heard the shots. And doctors and police were telephoned. They had telephones by then. She runs down the road to her dying husband and holds him in her arms, and they have their last sad moments. He had no clue who had killed him, but he was pretty sure it was a hired job, and he knew those two dudes that he'd run out of town didn't like him. So he had a long-standing order over the last couple of years. He had a $1,000 reward already set up as a reward for the person who will have killed me.
That's crazy. I've never heard of that.
Books today call them dying words that he told his wife to do that and that he knew who the killer was is not true. Not the articles of the day. None of that is true. But a posse was formed, lickety-split, and sent out after everyone looking for. They found this shabby brown horse down the way at a man in a town, Francis, Texas, John Williamson. And they recognized the markings of the horse matched what Ferguson remembered of that horse that had passed them, that interesting guy that, he's well dressed on this shitty old horse, run-down horse. And then they find wire cutters on the ground, probably used to cut through all of the cattle fences, right, to get where he wanted to be. And they were able to track those down to Barry Burrell, who had bought them. And he was a livestock speculator who, it eventually turns out, hired Miller on behalf of everyone and bought those wire cutters to do some killing. So that plus Ferguson's description of the killer, John Williamson, where the horse was found, he gives a statement that he had loaned the horse to Miller. This has got to be Miller. This seems pretty damn sloppy at the time, but everyone believes it's Miller. We got to find the dude, and we have no idea where the fuck he is. Everyone's hunting around. They knew he kind of lived in Texas and whatever, I forget what the town was that he lived in. But March 31st, a couple of dudes roll into town, sheriffs from Oklahoma, and they're talking to Tom Snow, who's a deputy in Hicks, Texas, just west of Fort Worth. I think that's where Miller lived, was in near Fort Worth. And he saw they had a bad map, and they were just going to get themselves all bass-ackwards, and I'll go with you guys. You know what? When you get the map wrong, how about I take charge? Map was wrong, and he took charge, and he said, okay, so now you're listening to me. He's got this little Indian sweetie on the side that I saw her walking by recently, and she was headed over to Morris's place, and I bet you Matt Morris's ranch is where he's at. Let's go check it out. So they headed, and this ranch is in like a protective ravine where you could see anyone coming. So they kind of sneak their way up. And Tom Snow says, well, we got to take him because we passed Morris on the way in. You ever heard of this thing called a telephone they got now? We can probably call him back. So we got to do this now. And they chickened out. They didn't want to do anything. So, all right, fine. Takes his gun off and walks up there casually, and the Indian girl is there. Can I help you? I'm looking for Miller, and he's not here. He pushes past him, and there's Miller with his gun drawn. And, well, dude, I'm just here to tell you what's going down. They want you in Oklahoma for killing a guy. And there's a whole posse around here in the hills waiting to take you. We can swap out now, or you can come with me and live and just go do your case. And he agrees. He hands over the gun and goes because he's cocky. He thinks he's got this covered. Mm-hmm. He even waives extradition. No, I'll go. You don't have to extradite me. I'll go to Oklahoma. And of course, he hires the best and now legendary criminal defense attorney named Moorman Pruitt. It's really weird spelling, Pruitt. Who is like this fiery, heavy drinking, overbearing, violent asshole of an attorney who is legendary in Oklahoma and I guess nationally of the day. So that and the fact that there was not much evidence they could really...
Yeah, there really wasn't any evidence.
No, I mean, wire cutters and a horse that... And yeah, he may have stayed at someone's house.
And then his word against someone else's word.
Right. How are they ever going to... Crap, Jesus, they're never going to convict this Miller guy. And he's known for having gotten out of every goddamn thing he's ever done. So, we're at the end. So... They escort him back. They had to kind of shuttle him off the train as it was coming into the station because there was a mob at the train station. So they kind of snuck him off and got him into the jail cell.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure there was plenty of angry people within the town.
And, well, because the sheriff, Bobbitt,
he was legendary.
He was loved, yeah. And so they put him in the cell. Along with, they basically got everyone collected up. April 6th, 1909, Miller, Jesse West of Canadian, Texas. That was a town in Texas. I had no idea.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. And Joe Allen, also of Canadian, Texas, and Barry Burrell. And there's a 19-year-old Oscar Peeler who had lent Miller the horse. And the evidence wasn't solid. Miller's history always got out of this shit. And he's sitting in the jail cell, and it's quiet night, and, nothing doing. It's all fine. We've got a big fence around the jail, and, the worst they saw was a couple of dudes wandering through. There's an old abandoned livery stable behind, a few yards away from the prison, but no, nothing happened. Sometime around, 2:30 in the morning, all the street lights go out. Okay. Yeah, that's probably, it's that new electrical thing. It's, who knows. And they had one guard, McCarthy, who's standing guard there in the jail cell through the night. And boy, did he not stand a chance. He was surprised by a mob of 150 to 200 men. No one's entirely sure. They had forced an engineer at the power company to switch off the power to the streetlights. They cut the telephone lines. Several men kind of wandered in the street in case anything went down to make sure no one could stop what they were about to do. They tore down the protective wooden fence. They pushed their way in. The guard that was there, he tried to resist. It's my duty to uphold the law. I cannot open that jail gate for you. I am staying in here and you're staying there. Doesn't matter. They broke it down. It's kind of hard to hold a gate against, 150, 200 men. And he still tried to stand his ground, so they pistol whipped him. The mob dragged all 4 prisoners from the jail to that barn 30 feet away. And they left Oscar Peeler behind, the kid who had just sold him the horse. He turned state's evidence anyway. It was testifying against them. And, his crime was giving a murderer a horse. So... They throw up some ropes, and here's where legend is really blurry, because some books will say that Miller was the first man to hang. Some say he was the last man to hang. Some say that he said, "Let the record show I've killed 51 men." Others say he said, "I killed Pat Garrett," or "Let her rip." Like, it's so obvious. No one has a fucking clue what he said. One guy said he didn't say a damn thing. I ought to know because I hung him. Yet this was also the same guy that the mob had tied him up at the jailhouse. like nobody knows, and no one was going to say a goddamn thing. Strangely, the police chief, George Culver, was not in town that night. Sheriff Tom Smith, he was out of town too. Nobody who
That's suspicious.
Yeah, everyone was gone. And even Tom Smith's son in 1972 said, I think they knew what happened. They knew what was going on, weren't there. So, yep. They hung him, and
they didn't want this guy to slip through the system one more time.
One more time, yeah.
Mob justice.
Mob justice, frontier justice, and that was the end of Miller's story. I
wonder how old he was at this point.
At this point, he was about 46 years old.
He made it quite a while, considering
which is
the
weird.
life he led.
That's my age. Yeah. He was graying at the time. That's a gray and hair man's life.
We don't have a mob waiting outside for you.
You have to expect at some point you do this for so long.
It's amazing. He got away with it as long as he did.
I don't know what the numbers are. Everyone comes up with something different. As many as 12 is, this legend of 51. He killed a lot of people, and
well, maybe too. Even if he didn't actually kill 51 people, maybe he had his hands, maybe he was involved with more killings than he actually did kill.
I would think so.
Maybe the figures are so varied because of his involvement with so many deaths.
By the law, if you ordered somebody to kill somebody, one of your lackeys, right? Well, then
you're
you are
as responsible.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But there you go. That was a long-winded story.
Don't say that. It was a winding road of...
So next time you have to do all the talking.
Stop it. Well, that's not possible.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, wait, what are you saying?
No, I'm just not capable.
Oh, okay.
We had a good time tonight, and we're in a different place than we normally record, so it's...
we'll see.
Good to know that we can move about and still podcast.
We can have a mobile studio.
That's right. When I have my little gypsy cart in the backyard, then we'll try recording from there.
We still got to do that outdoor episode.
I want to do that.
We need to do an outdoor episode.
We will.
So, guys, you'll know it's the outdoor episode if you hear ghetto
cicadas
hawks and
helicopters and cicadas and the neighbors that howl at the moon every single night at 8 o'clock.
Right. So don't forget to like us, comment on this episode, tell your friends, tell your parents, tell your great-grandparents. Okay, they don't listen to
tell your grandparents, share us, and do whatever you can to help us out, because we really appreciate you. We appreciate your support. And we want to thank Moonlight Magic for their contribution, which is H is for horse.
Hey, it's like a perfect song for this.
It is
H
perfect.
Is for horse. Yeah. And you can get it off their album called Phoenixotica.
And you can find that on Spotify.
So, let's ride off into the sunset.
Yippee-yi-yay.
Cow patty. Did you just kiss a cow patty?
I forgot my gong again.
Oh.